Are we all set to go?
Should be ready.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Today is Monday, June 15th, Village Board meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We getting our flag or no? There you go. Sorry. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
The United
of the
States
United
of
States of
America,
America,
and to the republic for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
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 nation,
nation,
under
under
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hope everybody's doing well this evening. Shelley, you want to call the roll, please?
Yes. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us
Awesome.
verbally.
Hold on, let me mute you. Give me just a second here.
Trustee Hall. Trustee Pearson.
Here.
Trustee Kubiak.
She's not with us yet.
Trustee Hirschbein.
Here.
Trustee Dalkowski.
here,
Trustee Lehman.
Here.
President Wiedmeyer.
Here.
5 of 7 are present. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. I believe we have one public comment this evening. Is that correct, Shelley?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Would you read that to us, please?
Yeah. This comment comes from Jennifer Zambrano. She's a resident. Her comment reads as follows. I am hoping, along with many of my neighbors, that the community-wide garage sale will be allowed following Monday's meeting. We are hoping to have it as soon as possible and are willing to help in any way needed. Many of us were already preparing for the sale prior to it being postponed. Many community sales are happening now and in the next coming weeks. This will only help bring in traffic for us as opposed to having it late summer or early fall. Thank you so much for your time and consideration in this matter. Again, Jenny Zambrano.
Dean, have we talked to community events if they
Yes,
are in favor of that also, or?
we do have a item for separate action this evening, item 7F, and we'll address it under that if that's okay.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, we'll move on to consent agenda, which includes the approval of the minutes of May 18th and May 26th and June 5th, all of this year. Approval of the warrant list, June 1st, in the amount of $288,403.04, and June 15th in the amount of $351,781.61. The approval of a second payment request for Route 72 Richard J. Brown intersection construction in the amount of $181,164.32 to Plody Construction Incorporated. And the approval of appointments of Brian DeSalle and Ronald Johnson, and reappointment of Chris Book and designation as chairman to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So if we can get a motion and a second on that, and we'll have any discussion if there is any.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you, guys. Any questions?
I was wondering
Any
how
question about Go ahead, Chuck.
the Route 72, how is it keeping on schedule?
Route 72 is, if you were up there today, you would have seen Commonwealth Edison out working in the right of way. They have 3 of the 4 poles that are required to be relocated installed. The 4th pole will be installed potentially tomorrow. The wires should be relocated by Friday. Plody has already started working on the northerly extension, so they have the dirt work part of it done. They're working on compaction. They'll be laying gravel, and they should be laying asphalt as soon as the end of this week. So the project is moving forward at a very good pace.
So that means the arms are there as well as the vertical part of the pole?
The traffic signals themselves are not yet. Those are long lead time order items. They take up to 20 weeks to get. In this case, we had to wait for a number of IDOT approvals before those could be ordered. So even though the preliminary geometrics for the traffic intersection were approved, we'd have to wait a long period of time to get the final approval on the actual dimensions of the signal arms themselves. Those are now approved. They have been ordered, but it's likely that we'll not have those until a September, October timeline.
Thank you.
And that payment amount of the 181,000, that is the amount that was scheduled to be paid as well. There's no variance in that amount.
This is the accurate amount. The only variance is there was a 1 penny difference in the previous payment, which is being corrected here. But the 2 payments that have been made are both for work that has been completed and successfully inspected, and we do recommend approval.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Nice to see you, Amber.
I'm so sorry.
That's
I
okay.
had to get on tonight.
That's okay. Glad you made it. Okay, if there's nothing else, Shelley, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Trustee Dolkowski,
Yes.
trustee Pearson,
Yes.
trustee Kubiak,
Yes.
trustee Hirschbein,
Yes.
trustee Lemus,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to separate item action. Oh, gosh, I can't even speak tonight. Separate action items. 7A is approval of a resolution in regards to fair housing. Dean, you want to give a little background on this, please?
I would be pleased to. The village has long been committed to fair housing. We have a very diverse offering of product types that are affordable for many different family households. As a component of our efforts to seek state grant funding for some of our major capital projects, one of the requirements is that you formally adopt a policy committing to fair housing practices. So this indicates that the village will not discriminate on the basis of any protected classification, and that if we become aware of discrimination, we will help refer residents to appropriate state and federal resources. Again, approval of this is a prerequisite for proceeding forward with the next round of grant applications that the village intends to file.
I move to approve the Fair Housing Act Resolution number 2020-R-16.
Second.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments?
So
Nope.
I just want to confirm, this doesn't commit us to anything. We're just confirming the fact that we are willing to look into every opportunity or approve every opportunity. It's not committing to approving anything. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's indicating that the village's formal commitment is to support the Fair Housing Act and to prohibit discrimination on the form of any protected classification. It is not committing any funding. It is indicating that we will refer complaints to state and federal resources, not that we will undertake any local actions with regard to them.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions. Shelley, call the roll, please.
Trustee Pearson,
Yes.
trustee Hirschbein,
Yes.
trustee Kubiak,
Yes.
trustee Dolkowski, trustee Dolkowski, I believe you're muted. Is she frozen?
Yeah, it
Yes.
looks like it.
Yep.
She said yes. She just said yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Trustee
Thanks.
Lemus,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, thanks. Trish, are you still with us? It looks like you're frozen again, unless you're just sitting really still.
She's frozen.
Okay, well, join us back again when you can, Trish. Moving on to item B is approval of an ordinance approving an amendment to Title 10, Chapter 9 of the Village Code of Ordinances pertaining to stormwater.
The village operates a municipal storm system. In the federal and state parlance, it's a municipal separate storm sewer system, or an MS4 system. In order for us to operate that, we're required to have a state Illinois Environmental Protection Agency permit. our current village engineers, Fair Graham, did an audit of our MS4 compliance, and as the board may recall from last year, determined that our MS4 permits had lapsed. We've worked with them over the past year to update our MS4 permits and to get back into compliance with state law. One of the requirements is that we have a formal set of MS4 policies in our ordinances regulating how we handle discharges to our drainage ways and how we regulate pollution of those drainage ways. This ordinance implements standards that are basically in keeping with the recommended standards, the minimum recommendations. The requirements that are in here are consistent with the plan review that Fair Graham is currently doing on any development that occurs. It's consistent with the plan review that's happened in the past on existing development. It is just a matter of formalizing these practices in our ordinance and committing to both complying with the minimum legal standards and also best management practices for stormwater management.
I move to approve the ordinance adopting an MS4 policy for the village of Pingree Grove.
Second.
Any questions? This is pretty much a housekeeping item, I think. If there's any questions or comments,
I noticed that there's some silt barricades in the basin on Daniel. Does that have anything to do with this?
Those are not anything new. Those are requirements under existing. When you're disturbing so much surface area, you're required to have an NPDES permit that indicates you'll comply with requirements for controlling siltation. And that is silt fencing that's in place to comply with that. Trustee Delkowski is joining us right now by audio.
Yes, I'm
I
here.
meant the ones that are actually in the pond.
I would defer to Mick on that one. I'm not sure.
Trustee Pearson, I haven't seen those, but it's not uncommon to put a silt fence on the if that pond was designed with a safety shelf. During the time when that pond was being built, they probably put a silt fence inside the pond to keep the embankment from eroding into the pond itself. And as that vegetation in the pond becomes finished, they'll pull that silt fence back out.
It's actually, they're floating and they're at the inlets from the streets.
I'll have George take a look tomorrow when he's in town.
Thank you.
they're floating, huh? What about those, Mick? The floating silt fence.
That sounds like they're no longer attached and it's doing any good. So sounds like they either need to be removed or replaced.
No, they have things that are actually, designed to float. Like, so you could see around the perimeter of them. They are intentional, as far as I can tell.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Shelley, call the roll, please.
Trustee Hirschbein,
Yes.
trustee Lemus,
Yes.
trustee Kubiak,
Yes.
trustee Delkowski,
Yes.
trustee Pearson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, item C is approval of agreement with Fair Graham for engineering services for the police department parking lot.
As the board may recall, as a part of our FY21 fiscal budget, we allocated funding for the repaving of the parking lot at the police station. That parking lot was built back in 2007, 2008, and has deteriorated significantly, as shown in the agenda memo. We are at a point where if we don't fix that, the potholes are sufficiently deep in the pavement that they're going to start jeopardizing the gravel that's under it. And when that starts having water go into it, you can lose the entire parking lot, requiring a complete reconstruction. Our goal for this project would be to bid this as a part of our MFT street patching program for this year, so that we can increase the quantity of asphalt we're buying and therefore hopefully reduce the per ton cost for that asphalt. In order for us to do that, though, we have to do some engineering on the parking lot to make sure that the design of it meets current accessibility standards and that it will drain properly and hopefully not have a recurrence of these issues. So this request is for funding to authorize an engineering services agreement with Fairgram to get that project underway. As indicated in the proposal that Fairgram provided, their estimate of the cost of this is $16,800. Part of that is on a time and materials work for the construction observation. We are asking for approval up to $20,000, although in keeping with their past work, we anticipate that they will come in at or under the approval level.
I move to authorize an agreement with Fairgram for parking lot civil engineering services in the amount not to exceed $20,000.
Second.
Okay, is there any questions or comments? Mick is still here. He can field anything we might have also. Mick, anything to add or?
No, sir.
Okay, call the roll, Shelley.
Trustee Lemus,
Yes.
trustee Pearson,
Yes.
trustee Hirschbein,
Yes.
trustee Dalkowski,
Yes.
trustee Kubiak.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item D is the waiver of bid irregularities and approval of an agreement with Fence Connection Incorporated for water tower fencing in the amount not to exceed $22,000.
As Pat has kept the board aware from time to time, we've had issues with vandals at the water tower. Some activities are as simple as throwing rocks at the water tower, but because of the epoxy coating on it, if rocks chip that epoxy coating, they can jeopardize the coating and cause the tower to rust. And as we know, it's very expensive to fix that. Vandals have also damaged some of the vents and other structures there. So one of our goals for this fiscal year was to put up a fence around the tower. We did follow the newly approved personnel handbook and go through a formal bid process. We included a copy of that bid packet so the board can see what that looks like and how that'll be used in the future. Unfortunately, we circulated this to 6 or 7 different vendors. We had 2 submit pricing. Neither one of them followed the exact bid format. They both submitted informal pricing. Nonetheless, we do believe that their costing is very cost effective, and we do recommend going forward with the pricing from the Fence Connection Inc. Fence Connection's price was $12,885 as bid. Again, our request would be to approve this at $14,000, so we do have a little bit of funding in the event that we encounter any unanticipated contingencies. The layout for the fence is shown in the agenda packet, but essentially it would enclose the water tower and part of the driveway to the water tower. That would be on page 104 of the agenda packet. And the goal of this is simply to protect our investment in that water tower and the facilities that are there.
I have a couple of questions. The first one would be the one that from the Fence Connection was only for 6-foot fence. The other one was for 8-foot fence. I did not see that the one for the Fence Connection had the barbed wire across the top, and the other one did.
I don't believe we would anticipate going with the barbed wire at this point in time. I think our belief is that just the chain link by itself would be appropriate. Their quote was also for black coated fencing, and we're investigating the potential to substitute galvanized fencing and maintain the 8-foot height, which would be the preference.
We believe that the distance from the water tower is sufficient to keep people from doing the rock throwing type of thing.
I think if we could keep people further back from the tower, we would do so, but the further you get, the significantly greater the expense becomes in fencing off the area. So we are trying to do something that is not aesthetically displeasing, but that provides a reasonable amount of security and hopefully indicates the importance of staying back from the water tower.
So that so there's no rocks that are conveniently accessible for somebody then? It's all blacktop, is that correct? The road is.
That's correct. At present, the rocks are being retrieved from near the base of the tower. So this should help with that issue.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if we should maybe table this for next meeting just to get an updated proposal. I mean, personally, I was going in and getting bids for fences and everybody's usually pretty competitive. I mean, it makes me nervous if the bids aren't apples to apples and, you know, we're talking around a 37% profit margin. That's where, I mean, a difference in price, that's usually profit margin right there.
We certainly can do that if the board would prefer. I'll defer to Pat, but Pat, can you talk about our past experience with Fence Connection?
Yes, the Fence Connection did the relocation of the fence at the water plant and the installation of the gates at the water plant. They've been a very responsive contractor. They also have fixed some of the fences around the playgrounds that are the aluminum fences, the decorative aluminum fences as well. I think most of the fence people were booked up for the year, and that's why we had trouble getting prices for this. They just didn't seem interested at all in bidding. The two vendors that did bid both pretty much gave bids from the previous year when we kind of were checking just to see what it would cost. Fence Connection did give me a price last year to go to an 8-foot fence. It was a $1,400 upcharge.
Okay.
And between that and the reduced price to going to galvanized, we believe the 14,000 will be adequate.
Okay. I move to waive bidding irregularities and authorize an agreement with Fence Connection Incorporated for water tower fencing in an amount not to exceed $14,000.
Second.
I think President Wiedemeyer, you're muted at the moment.
Any other questions or comments? Shelley, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Trustee Hirschbein,
Yes.
trustee Kubiak,
Yes.
trustee Delkowski,
Yes.
trustee Lemus,
Yes.
trustee Pearson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Oh no, I'm just a mess. Shelley, can you go ahead and read the next item on the agenda, please? I just had a
Yeah.
little stuff in. Oh, I got it. Sorry.
Okay.
We're on item E, approval of a resolution authorizing $4,000 in additional funding for the Pingree Grove Pollinator Garden. Does anybody want to talk about this?
I'd be pleased to. The Park Advisory Committee has completed much of the work at the Pollinator Garden. They would like to complete some additional plantings and potentially install some benches, possibly install some additional mulch, and also install a monument sign. They have done some costing and they believe the estimated cost for this would be roughly $4,000. We do have the Parks Fund, which was sourced from a ComEd grant. That grant has now been fully expended. And also a park impact fee contribution from DR Horton. That park fund has a current outstanding balance of $16,343 that have not been allocated. The Park Advisory Committee's request is that we allocate funding to further enhancements at the Pollinator Garden. And later in tonight's agenda, we will have a discussion item on other recommendations from the Park Advisory Committee.
So they're actually, this is trustee Delkowski, so they're actually asking for an additional 4,000. And is this not the same amount that a few months ago that we anticipated would come forward?
I believe their previous spending request was for $22,000, and this is $4,000 to supplement that, which would bring the project total to $26,000 authorized. We were anticipating that there would be potentially some additional costs, but I don't believe we had hard numbers to it previously. Our Public Works Director did some costing on benches, and we have plant costs for when we bid those out previously. So this is what they determined would be appropriate.
I
And
think I'd
Karen,
like
do you
to-
have any insight into this on the finances of this?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
I move to
I
approve
don't-
the resolution 2020-R-17 authorizing additional funding for the Pingree Grove Pollinator Garden.
Second.
I'll second.
Pat, have you seen the garden? I mean, I haven't been by there in a while.
Yeah, I've been down there. We still have to extend the path. We called the Julie request in last week. At the end of the week, we've got irrigation fully functional down there. We added some misters so we don't flood the place out. It looks pretty nice. It's a little sparse on plants right now, but a lot of the plants will grow into the space just fine.
I
And
was
Dean-
down there at the garden yesterday, and Mr. Kelly from the Heritage District talked to me about the garden. Looks like it has a lot of weeds out there. What's the intention of doing that weed control a little bit?
I believe the Park Advisory Committee had indicated that they had a long-term commitment to maintaining the garden once it was installed.
Make a call, Chuck.
Me?
You saw the weeds. My
Um,
guess by the end of the week, they're only going to be, bigger and better.
It was actually Mr. Kelly that it indicated that there was a lot of weeds out there.
That may be a part of the request for additional mulch to provide additional weed barrier around plants that are not intended. And I should note the mulch previously was donated to the site by our friends over at Central Tree.
Also on the benches, are these, we didn't get any specifics at all on what they were looking at, like 6-foot benches, 8-foot benches, something that would be ADA compliant if it ever comes to that.
The pathway that's installed in the garden at present is not ADA compliant. We provided a couple different options to the committee, but I don't have specifics on exactly what they're proposing.
Okay.
Shelley, did we get a second on the motion?
Yes, we did.
Any more questions or comments?
Are we gonna do a not greater than? Seems like we had 22, now we have 4,000 more, so that's 26. I'm just curious how high we're gonna go. We get, every few months we get another request for a few $1,000s.
The Park Advisory Committee does have other recommendations for improvements in other areas of the village that we'll review later this evening. At this point, we're not aware of additional requests for funding for this project. I
Okay,
know long-term, they're interested in potentially doing a pergola or other improvements, but we don't have any data on that at this point.
all right.
Are they pursuing any fundraising opportunities?
Not that we're presently aware of.
Just at the village board
That's
meeting.
what I was
Oh,
thinking. That would be a good idea, to have maybe pavers with names engraved in them, or benches, dedicated in honor to or in memory of somebody. I think there's a lot of potential for fundraising for these types of events, and being that it is looking like a very nice place to visit, that I think that might be a good possibility. And I would imagine that the Park Advisory Committee would take the lead on that fundraising.
I know they
They-
have had some preliminary discussions about those kind of concepts, but I don't believe there are any projects currently underway.
They have had quite a few. When I was on the committee, there was quite a few discussions about that. So there's, the paving was one of the big ones, and they did quite extensive research on.
So to Chuck's point, maybe this is a good idea that we can put not to exceed $4,000, and then just keep in the back of our minds that, you know, any request for future funding, we would hope to be offset with fundraising.
So the way the park committee ordinance works, we don't have staff spending authority to spend on behalf of the committee. So if it is park committee funds, those have to come to the village board. Even though this is only $4,000 and would ordinarily be within staff authority, it did come to the village board. So if the board does approve this, any further funding requests have to come back to the board. If they want to spend $4,100, that extra $100 comes back to the board.
I think to their point, Dean, maybe when we pass the funds along, then we just pass along the comments from the board also.
Absolutely.
I know the pavers, the engraved pavers are a long shot because we have no paver surface down there, and you really have to have a paver service like at Centennial Park to put the engraved pavers in, because you'll get a very small number of engraved pavers for your field of, you know, that you're going to pave. So, and the cost for that would be, I'm sure, out of reach for this project. So, but the sponsorship of benches or something like that would be, I think that would be doable, but just pass the comments along.
Will do.
Any other comments then to this topic before we call the roll? Shelley?
Trustee Hirschbein,
Yes.
trustee Kubiak,
Yes.
trustee Lemus,
Yes.
trustee Pearson,
Yes.
trustee Dalkowski.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to our last action item for the evening is the approval of an ordinance regulating certain activities.
Thank you.
Dean?
And I have our events committee chair on with us. I'm gonna get her started here. Our events committee chair, Jackie Pierce, has been kind enough to join us this evening. As the board is aware, in the past, we've taken action to temporarily regulate the issuance of solicitor permits, itinerant merchant permits, and similar permits, and also to prohibit the issuance of garage sale permits. That has been in keeping with the actions that have been recommended or required by the state of Illinois, the governor's office, and the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. In the past week and a half, the state has changed their regulations and their recommendations. They now indicate that it is lawful to conduct garage sales, even though they're not defined as an essential business, provided that social distancing, masks, and restrictions on no more than 10 persons attending apply. As we understand in discussing that with DCEO, the 10-person restriction is intended to apply per garage sale so that you don't have 10 or more people at one specific site. There is strong resident interest in conducting garage sales again, whether individually or as a part of a community-wide organization. I think we have a public comment on that from one of our residents. I'll ask Shelley to share with us in just a minute here. But fundamentally, the state regulations have changed. What this ordinance does is it indicates that the village will issue permits for these types of activities within the constraints that the state allows. From a practical perspective, we do not have the resources to go out and take enforcement action if someone has 11 people at their garage sale instead of 10. We're aware that the community-wide garage sales tend to be very heavily populated and have the potential to draw significant crowds. We are seeing that in other neighboring communities, though, some even before the state had changed the regulations applicable to this. We've had some preliminary conversations with the events committee, and I understand that they would be willing to take a role in assisting with this project. I'll defer to Jackie on that point. What I'd like to do at this point is turn it over to Shelley with our resident comment, and then turn it over to Jackie for some additional feedback.
So I had already shared the comment during the public comment portion at the beginning of the meeting. That was the only comment we received. So if you want to send it to Jackie now.
Jackie?
Okay, everybody hear me okay? I see a bunch freezing. I don't know if it's me or you. Yeah, so the committee, I think we're willing to move forward and do what we need to do to help everybody out and have the garage sale. there's a couple of things that come in play when it comes to the garage sale. So we have advertisement, which is one of the things our committee does, which brings in the people. So we need enough time to be able to do that. It's a short turnaround, so getting stuff out to the different newspapers and things like that, it doesn't take too much time. We usually have to do it the week before anyways, but we just have to make sure that we know when those deadlines are hitting so we can actually get it out there. The other thing that we have done in the past is the map. And that's the biggest concern when it comes to this and when we can get some of that stuff done. There are certain committee members that have been doing this for a few years, and they're the ones that I kind of need help with to make this map happen. So if you're not aware, people register for the garage sale, it goes into our system. We take those and we manually put them into a Google map. And then we produce a link that people could go onto and know where all the different garage sales are. That's probably the most labor intense part of this whole thing, is trying to get all of that. In the past, it used to be paper registration turned in. We'd have to take all that paper and create some kind of spreadsheet. Over the past 2 years, we've been able to launch online registration. So in the last 2 summers, we've seen a split between paper registration and online. When it comes to everything with the social distancing and us trying to manage stuff properly, my first suggestion would be is to try to get this as much online as possible, so that it's coming that way instead of paper trying to flow through the village. We would need to cut off the registration. Our garage sale normally happens Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's what the garage sale residents that like garage sales, they want it Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we would have to have the deadline and the cutoff for the map by end of work business on the Tuesday before. That would be cutting it the shortest that we could possibly do, so that we have that 24 hours to actually make the map. So we have to think of all those types of things. So just throwing that out there, if we eliminate the map completely, it makes it much easier. We can launch stuff. But I think the map is valued with this garage sale. So I wouldn't want to do that. So I guess there's a couple options. The soonest that we could probably do it would be the weekend of June 25th, 26th, 27th. That would be us putting everything together within the next 24 hours, getting advertisement out there, launching registration, and then having it due on the evening of the 23rd. So that would be the quickest, and it would be short turnaround. So everyone in the village has to be ready for that. Then we start to get into 4th of July weekend, which I'm not sure they're going to want to do garage sales on that weekend. And the weekend after that, being July 9th to the 11th. If we do it the 9th to the 11th, I'm going to need assistance because the other committee member that helps me out with this will be out of town. So I'll have to kind of figure out who's going to help me with that. So those are the options that we have out there.
Jackie, what about the weekend following that? When does your assistants return back to the community?
Well, they actually leave that week. So they probably will be gone through the weekend after that, which it's not the end of the world. We could try to find someone to help me out with it. But I just have to reach out and see who I can get to help out.
Jackie, this is Trustee Delkowski. So the that third weekend, or would that be the third weekend in July, the 16th through the 18th? What I was thinking too is the signage that you have everywhere that says, our village garage sale is always, I think, the third weekend in June. We could, kind of, use the same one, just put a nice big X through June and say July. We could, to save some money. I'm thinking that 25, 26, and 27th of June, that's 10 days. And I think that would be a good time to have a garage sale. However, those people that are contemplating having one, I think it would be really difficult to put that together for themselves in 10 days. If my thoughts.
Correct. And the signage that you're talking about is the big banners that we have, which that would make
Yeah.
that much easier to scratch out June, put July. And the signage that goes throughout all the neighborhoods, we actually work with a real estate agent that helps us out. She actually purchased all new signs this year. And she's been great and flexible. So I will talk with her too, because she would be the one that would put up all the signs for us throughout the neighborhoods. And those are not dated at all. Those are just garage sale, and we put those up the night before.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot to ask for all of these volunteers to put this together. 10 days seems like a lot to put it together. And the other comment that I had is regarding the paper versus online registration. Could we not this year, and maybe moving forward all years, say online registration is the only acceptable form of registration? If you want to register, you have to do it online.
I think we would typically try and make some accommodations for residents that, for whatever reason, don't have online access. But we would definitely steer as many people as possible towards the online.
Yeah, and honestly, the last 2 years, it's getting close to that anyways. Most everyone has figured out the online. One, it's easier for them, it's easier for us. They make sure that they're actually on the map. They could do it last minute and still get on the map. So I think the majority of people will do it online, especially if we encourage it this year. And those couple that flow in, we can manage those.
So this action item doesn't have the date prescribed for the garage sales. Our request would be to approve this, and we will work with Jackie and the rest of our incredibly talented events committee to select an appropriate weekend and start publicity for that and make it a successful and safe event.
And so this ordinance is not, or this motion is not just for the village-wide garage sale, but it's to give permits to individual residents who want to have a private garage sale outside of the events committee's garage sale. Is that correct?
That's correct. It also allows us to reinitiate issuing solicitor permits, itinerant merchant permits, and similar permits.
I move to approve the ordinance regulating certain activities.
I'll second.
And I will make one more comment. The waiting till the July dates and mid-July, we also have to remember that we might be in phase 4. So there might be some more restrictions lifted if it goes that route too. So we might not have to worry so much about the 10 people thing too.
Maybe we could say something like consistent with whatever the state regulation is.
I believe we have that in the last sentence of section 1 of the ordinance.
It will be appropriate at whatever, wherever we're at in the state. Don't you think you're going to get some pushback from these normal people that love their June dates though, Jackie?
Yeah, but I think this year is just different in general. You're going to see a lot more people trying to get out in July anyways. Some of us are just starting to get out. But I think in July, everyone's going to be itching to get out. So it might actually be a really good time because people are cramming in theirs right now, but then may not have much to do still come July.
And Jackie, is there a rain date consideration depending on the weather?
No, because it's a 3-day event. And typically we don't have 3 days of rain. So yeah, sometimes say the Thursday we have rain, but it ends up being like nice the next 2 days. So yeah, we've never had a rain date for it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Shelley, you want to call the roll, please?
Trustee Delkowski,
Yes.
trustee Kubiak,
Yes.
trustee Pearson,
Yes.
trustee Hirschbein,
Yes.
trustee Lemus.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay.
I'd like to thank our incredibly talented and diligent events committee chairwoman, Jackie Pierce, for joining us this evening. And we look forward to working with her and making this a successful project for the village.
Thanks, Jackie.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, Dean, you want to kick off staff reports?
Yes, the first item we have in our staff reports is discussion of the capital plan update. We had attempted this on previous agendas, but due to some timing challenges had not gotten to it. Based on the feedback and discussion with the board since the budget came for approval, we've made some updates to this. One is instead of showing lump sum computer replacement at the end of the cycle, we're showing it split out over 5 years and budgeting funding for it each year. 2 is we have server replacement similarly situated on an 8-year cycle. On both of those, we have inflationary cost adjustments. 3 is we've previously allocated funding for the balloon payment due in FY28 for the municipal center bonds. In accordance with the handling of the payment of the rest of those bonds, we are allocating that between general fund and utility fund capital because a very, very significant portion of our building square footage is dedicated to meeting the needs of our utility services. In the past, so last year in the FY20 budget, the capital budget showed $50,000 being allocated towards the balloon payment. However, it didn't show where that funding went. Where that funding actually went was just into the fund balance for the general fund. The concern we had in looking at this and trying to have the best practices for transparency was that it could be counted twice, that we'd be putting that funding in the general fund balance, and the board might see unallocated fund balance and think that that could be used for other projects. The way we split out the capital fund now, you will see lines that we've added showing restricted fund balance for technology and restricted fund balance for municipal center balloon payment. So as we indicate we're putting funding towards the balloon payment, it goes into a restricted fund balance, and you'll see that fund balance increase. So in the case of the balloon payment, that increases every year until the year of the payment, FY28. In the case of the technology fund, you will see that fund balance increasing and decreasing over time as we're adding funding into it and as we're pulling funding out for purchases. So we're trying to give a more accurate projection on where the village is at in terms of actual cash position in the utility fund and in the general fund. With regard to the utility fund, the rate structure the village currently has in place has again put us in I would say a conservative position to be able to undertake the significant expansions that we need to our water and wastewater systems. We are working diligently on grant applications to help support that need as well. With regard to the capital fund though, as we move from just showing expenses and the total of expenses every year into showing a projected fund balance, for the general fund, capital fund, the challenge is we don't have a funding source that is providing funding to those expenses. So we can project out and say in so many years we need to buy this, or we need to buy that, or we need to get equipment. The challenge is unless we're putting funding into that account will be depleted. So under the current projections by FY25, that account will be in the red. And in subsequent years, it'll be in the red by an additional roughly $500,000 every year. This points to the need to develop roughly in present cash dollars, $500,000. And that increases year over year because of the increase in cost of equipment replacement in order to fund our long-term capital needs. I should also note that's not providing or allocating any additional funding to our roadway projects. So as we look at long-term operational needs, the board has spent a great deal of time over the past year talking about the police department. As we look at long-term capital needs, we've spent a significant amount of time talking about roads and talking about our need to expand funding beyond just our base MFT allocation. But we also need to acknowledge that we have a structural imbalance in how the capital fund works. And we need to allocate funding to that in order to make that a sustainable proposition for a long period of time. Our goal would be to bring back this capital plan to the village board for adoption as a budget amendment, as an update to our budget, and recognizing that we are several years out from this challenge, but it is one that we have to confront now, and view this as a part of our overall goal towards moving in the direction of financial sustainability. Again, if you look at the items that we have in there, we are incredibly conservative in what expenditures we're going to make in vehicle replacement, in facilities, and everything across the board. We project getting a lot of life out of every vehicle we have. And in particular, in the general fund, we are still projecting out new and used squad car purchases. And as the board is aware, for this fiscal year, we were anticipating a used squad car purchase. We have that on hold at present because we're waiting to see fully what the financial impacts of COVID are. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have, but again, our intention would be returning at a future board meeting with this as a item for consideration of approval as a budget amendment. If there are no board comments at this point, I'll move on to additional future park improvements. At the encouragement of the board, we've reached out to the Park Advisory Committee with regard to future improvements that they believe would be appropriate. We've also worked with Pat, who has a great handle on the condition of all of our parks and what our needs are. I'll start a little bit with some of the things that Pat has talked about. One is, as the board may recall, we believe there's a necessity to construct a garage at the baseball fields to provide additional storage. At present, the concession stand, the existing small utility building, and even the bathrooms are full of items being stored. And even with that, we have equipment being stored outside there. In addition, the current garbage can corral is on the bike path, which means when the garbage truck comes to service it, the garbage truck has to drive down the bike path, which causes significant wear to that. So one of our recommendations would be looking at building a garage in that area, building a garbage enclosure next to it that would allow the garbage to be accessed from the parking lot. We have a number of playgrounds that have equipment that require repair or that will require replacement in the near future. We also don't have funding allocated for redoing some of our original parks that are now nearing 15 years in age. In addition, we have basketball equipment that was removed from the former open space in the Heritage District that we would like to reinstall at a future location when that's been determined. So those are some of the items that staff has developed. If you haven't been down Daniel Boulevard lately, it's worth driving out there and seeing the new baseball fields that are being installed as a component of the Cambridge Lakes North development. That area is looking really great, and that will be a great enhancement to our park amenities. In terms of recommendations from the Park Advisory Committee, as outlined in the memo, the primary recommendation would be to start converting roughly 2 acres per year of the 16-acre park in the Heritage District to turf grass that would be available for recreational purposes, picnics, sports, and similar activities. The Park Advisory Committee's recommendation was to spend between $750 and $1,000 per year for the next 6 to 8 years on seed cost to overseed the area. I think it's fair to say the Park Advisory Committee feels very strongly that this park was a part of their original mandate, and it's something that should be done for the village. And it certainly would be a fantastic amenity for the village to have that be done. From a practical perspective, while I understand the importance of the park, we don't have an identified source of funding for improvements in any parks other than the $16,000 we have remaining, of which $4,000 was allocated to the pollinator garden this evening. We don't have an identified source of funding for maintaining a 2 to 16 acre park of turf grass near the Heritage District, and that would be a significant undertaking. We don't have equipment to be able to do leveling or overseeding in an effective fashion, and simply spreading seed over the surface is not likely to produce a positive result. If we're going to do this properly and attempt to actually establish turf grass there, we would really need to do a civil engineering plan because we'd be disturbing more than 2 acres. Earlier this evening, we approved our MS4 process for stormwater. We would have to do a civil engineering site plan and NPDES permit, silt fencing, remove the existing weeds and grass that are there, level it, grade it, establish drainage, and then seed it properly and establish turf grass. And as the board is aware from discussions over the past year, we don't have a source of water in that area to be able to irrigate it. So from a staff perspective, we're somewhat caught in a challenging position here because we understand the Park Advisory Committee, we understand their attachment to the park and their perception, and I think it's an accurate one, that this park was a significant reason why the committee was formed. It's a part of their original mandate, but we don't have a good mechanism in place to be able to move towards the goals that they have. And we don't feel that overseeding and spending $1,000 on grass seed is going to be likely to have a demonstrable impact on the appearance of the park.
We're talking about the same parcel that the original conception plan was from.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct? So,
Yes.
and that is not owned, that's still owned by the county and not by the village,
It's owned by the King County Forest Preserve, and we have a lease on it.
right? I think it'd be wisely, if we did have any funding available, that we use it towards property that is actually owned and can be properly maintained by the village. Getting back to the garage, wouldn't that be something that we would request support or funding from the Northwest Little League? I mean, they currently use one of our buildings as it is right now to store the kitty litter or whatever you want to call it, to dry out the fields, chalk for striping and equipment in there. So I would assume, you know, we can work something out with them on additional, a garage or get it being compensated in somehow, or assisting in building a garage.
That certainly would be a goal that we would have. From a practical perspective, I think that likely delays us a year or several years on the project if the board is interested in doing it. The revenue and operations of the Little League have been greatly and direly impacted by COVID. At present, they're allowed to have some very, very limited practices with small groups, no more than 10 there, but they can't have any competitive play. And they have greatly restricted the amount of activities and participation that they're having. So my expectation would be that their funding would be very, very similarly constricted for the foreseeable future. If there are no other board comments on that, we will work to talk to the Park Advisory Committee further about their plans, and we'll work towards a focus on village-owned properties at this point in time.
Yeah, it just seems like that, you know, as an awesome idea, and I appreciate all that the committee does. We are just in a fucking crisis, and you know, perhaps if we go towards a referendum and it's passed and we take some of the you know, and the budget is eased a little bit by that, maybe that's something that we can revisit. But you know, we're going to have to just start cutting corners drastically sooner rather than later. And I would love to see all the seating and all of that we talked about. I just, you know, we would have to see where that would come from. We'd have to be really creative on where that would come from. And we always have to, we're always prioritizing what, it's not even what we would like to have, but what we need should be at the top of that list of what we're going to fund.
We will provide that feedback. The last item I have for staff reports this evening is talking about our wonderful events committee chair, Jackie Pierce. As many of you know, Jackie has been at the heart of the community events committee for many, many years. She has dedicated countless thousands of hours to the village, to each of our events. She has given of her time and her family's time. We have likely violated some child labor laws somewhere along the way with all the stuff her family has done. Of her house, of her garage, of storage, of all of her talents. She's been just an incredible asset and partner for the village. And candidly, without her efforts and the efforts of the events committee, which are a volunteer organization, the events that we have simply wouldn't be possible. We are incredibly happy for her family that she is moving forward in a positive direction, but we're saddened to share that she will be moving out of Pingree Grove and her role with the committee will be diminishing. And so over the continuation of this calendar year, she's indicated that she'll be available as an asset and resource for the remainder of the committee, but her role is going to be greatly diminished. We have a number of other members of the committee that are part-time residents of Illinois that are not always here for all the events or the planning for the events. And so that presents some challenges in terms of how our events are put together. The purpose of this action item is twofold. One, from the staff perspective, we believe that some significant recognition for Jackie is due. I think in the 15 years I've been here, I don't know of other volunteers that have put in as much time or effort on behalf of the village or that have been as unsung as Jackie has been. And we believe it's appropriate to recognize that in a significant way. And two, as we look towards future community events, so this has been an auspicious year, and this year at present, our Independence Day celebrations have been postponed. But if we thought about sitting down and trying to host an event like that without the support of a strong and vital volunteer committee, we don't have the staff resources to be able to do that. We don't have the resources to do the fundraising necessary to do that, and it imperils our future events. And so we wanted to start a public discussion about this. One, to get some feedback on what the board feels would be appropriate with regard to Jackie. And if you're more comfortable providing that offline, please feel free to do so. And two, to start a dialogue about how we ensure that the events committee is revitalized and continues to have a strong amount of activity in the community.
Well, hopefully I don't freeze this time. I think it's just maybe some more social media regarding the events committee. There's still lots of people throughout the community that have no idea that the hours that are put into it, and that, for example, the Independence Day celebration, that's funded solely on charitable contributions and fundraising. So I think once people understand really what goes into it, maybe we can get some more individuals to participate and get involved.
Dean, do we presently have anyone that's willing to take over as chair of the events committee?
We do have some members of the committee that are very active, and in the past couple of weeks, Candace Leck has stepped up and taken somewhat of a leadership role with the committee, but we also know that there are parts of the year when they're not in town. So I think we have some members of the committee that are very supportive and that will be great assets to work with into the future, but I think we need to help them expand their membership and ensure continuing success.
What is the current number of members on that board?
I don't have that in front of me at the moment. I'm sorry.
16.
6. Thank you.
Hmm.
And of the 6, at least 3 are people that are part-time residents of the state.
Okay, then I'm going to second what Joe says and agree we need to do some type of social media posts to try to get others involved.
And we need to stress the fact that these events will not happen without community involvement. Because I mean, that's quite frankly the brutally honest truth is the village can't undertake these kind of events on their own staff time and employee time.
I can tell you all that Jackie is watching right now, so if you've ever wanted to be able to say anything to her and not have her be able to respond, this is your opportunity. And on that note, while I know that she's watching, I'd like to take a minute here and turn it over to Karen and Sean and Pat and talk about what it's been like to work with her over each of their tenure here. Again, we will formally recognize her in the future, but knowing that she's watching right now and while we're talking about this, her impact on the village, I think, is something we should spend a couple minutes on. So Sean?
Oh, thanks, Dean. Jackie has been the best to work with. She has been completely able to handle the stress of putting all this together with minimal input from the other department heads. Great coordinator. She really has done so much for the village. I mean, I just can't say enough about her. So,
Pat?
Sure. I repeat what Sean said, but Jackie is, everybody that's done this has done a good job, and each person has outdone the last person. And, you know, Jackie by far has taken so much off our plate when we do these things that it makes it extremely easy for Public Works to assist in whatever way, because she's learned all that from all the years that she's been doing this. And I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody that's done this over the years, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's a lot of long hours. I hope we can find someone to replace her, but maybe they break the group up into smaller groups and plan for certain events, especially without people that are part-time. But I'm sure we'll get that all figured out, but she's been a blessing to work with.
Karen?
Well, from a finance perspective, Jackie's been extremely diligent in managing her budget and getting the fundraising done that she needed to do. Every year they come in under the amount of money that they've fundraised. I remember watching her approach Lloyd Gobert when the night that they asked to do their light show. And she walked away with a donation from them. So she's extremely diligent in handling her finances. There's no question about that. From the perspective of organization, I know that one of her strengths is to recognize issues that may or may not be happening between staff and volunteers. And one of the things that she does is manage that very well by being the point person, being the person to take the brunt of her committee's frustrations or the village staff's frustrations, and try to bring people back together and work toward that goal that allows that small group of people to put together such incredible events. So she takes her experience, like Pat said, from the events that she's done here in the village, as well as her experience with the park districts that she works with on a daily basis, and tries to pull all that together. And I think in the 4 years that I've been here, it's been really amazing to watch, and she's been a pleasure to work with. So from the financial side as well.
So we will be taking action to formally recognize her at a future board meeting, and we would really like to solicit some feedback from the board if you have any thoughts on what that should look like. And that's all that I have this evening.
Okay. Sean, anything to add police-wise?
Just two quick follow-ups from Friday's weekend review. We discussed on Friday the abandoned 911 call that we had a complaint on that said we never responded to it. You're aware that they supplied us with the wrong cell phone number. We had to play every single phone call into the 911 center and was able to locate the call by using GPS coordinates once we found an abandoned call. There was absolutely nothing that was said to the dispatch center. It was just simply an open line, and that disconnected at some point. We were able to confirm the phone number through history with the household, and we did send them a letter out once we confirmed that there was nothing on the tape indicating the complaint was closed at this time. And then the only other thing I got is that we met with Tim Perry, and he should have something for additional training for the officers probably in the next 7 to 10 days.
So Chief,
yes,
on the 911 call you referenced, that was a citizen complaint that the village had failed to respond. Just so we're clear here, the village was never dispatched to that call. Our dispatch center never identified where the call came from and never sent any notice to our department to respond in any way?
yes, that is absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Since there was no communication from them, there was no reason to dispatch anybody out there. We were completely unaware that the call had even been made. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Karen, how are you tonight?
Couldn't be better. You have the financial reports for the end of the year, FY20. They are, of course, a draft format because they haven't been audited yet. There's always some additional tweaks that we make as we go through that process. But I think substantially the fund balances should remain where they're at. I don't know if there were any specific questions that anyone had. I haven't received any questions, and I know that Dean had sent out a memo on behalf of the staff with some of the highlights of the financial reports. One of the things that Dean mentioned earlier that I think we need to discuss is the recommendation to make a transfer from the general fund to the capital fund to help fund those capital projects that we have coming up every year. And then the balance or the budget from last year was 80-some thousand dollars, I think 82,000. And of course, we came in significantly under budget in the general fund. So the question is, would the board want to make a larger contribution to the capital fund to take advantage of that savings that we made last year? So if anybody has any questions, or if you want to send me your comments, I'd be happy to address those.
I want to very briefly focus on what Karen just said there. Our revenues in FY20 were down because of the impact of COVID and a number of other factors. Nonetheless, because of the very conservative budget projections that Karen puts together for the village, we came within 4% of our overall revenue projections for the year. On the other side of that, because of the concerted efforts of Karen, of Sean, and of Pat, in our general fund overall, we were 23% under our budgetary estimates. So in FY20, despite all of the additional things we did, activities we did, moving into this building, everything the village undertook, we spent $285,000 less in our general fund in FY20 than we did the year before, despite commodities being more, fuel being more, everything under the sun. And that is due solely to the dedicated efforts of your department heads in managing their departments. On the other side of that, that's not a sustainable approach. And as the board is aware, part of our cost management is not making necessary purchases that we have to make. So it is great news, and it was great performance by, and predominantly, if you look at the savings, by Sean and Pat in their departments. But in the long term, we have to address this and provide funding so that they can operate in accordance with best practices.
Wasn't the majority of that saved on like rodent control?
Our rodent control budget in the new building is significantly down.
Okay.
No, there were a number
It's
of
already
areas
paying for itself.
a number of areas where the budget came in significantly under budget. I think the single largest savings would have been in the police department. The police department came in 15% under budget by themselves, and they're the largest component of the general fund. But there were savings in each of the departments. We had some significant reductions in central services and in what we spend on outside services. And in particular, we have tried to take full advantage of the fixed fee agreement that we have with Fair Graham, and have utilized Fair Graham to do many projects that in the past we would have paid separately to have a third-party consultant do for us. So that relationship has been very beneficial as well. But we tried to outline in every area where our savings has been, and it was really an exceptional performance by your department heads.
Okay, great. Pat, anything to add this evening?
We're just plugging away on the honey-do list for Public Works, and it's long, but we'll work our way through it.
Okay. Mick, you're all smiles down there, and
Yeah, it's my basement where, I usually get left alone. So I'm a happy person down here. And my engineer's reports in the packet. If anybody has any questions, trying to keep everybody up to date on the various things that are going on. If there aren't any questions, I do want to give Dean, if you want me to share my screen from here, or you're going to do it from there. Good. Just want to give everybody a quick update on the status of the water project that we're working on for you guys. Just give you like an update on the progress, outline some phasing, further phasing of the project that's been discussed with the IEPA to stretch the project out a little bit. Discuss the reduction in our contract as a result of that proposed phasing, and then outline a possible option for some cost savings on a way that we can approach the test well that maybe could save some money long term. So that's kind of where we're going to go here, and I promise I'll go quickly because I know it's getting late. So to date, we've been working with the IEPA to get the project plan approved, which of course you may remember the project plan is the first step to get IEPA approval towards heading towards money from the revolving loan program. The project plan was submitted. We did run into some complications getting it approved because there was some erroneous information about the existing plant's capacity down at the IEPA, but that's been cleared up and been walked through. In addition to that, as I think both Dean and Pat will tell you, the revolving loan program is not really set up for a community like Pingree Grove. It's set up for those communities that are already under capacity and have a failing system. What you have is a growing community, and you're trying to get out in front of what's coming to you by expanding your system to meet the needs that are coming, and that really complicates the IEPA's look at your system. But we've got the project plan approved. Seth handled the PED hearing here last meeting, and that documentation has been turned around back to the IEPA. So now we actually have been placed on the priority project list. That came out last week from the IEPA. So Pingree Grove's water project is listed on the priority project list for funding in what they'll call it fiscal year 2022, but it's funding in 2021 because their fiscal year 2022 starts in 21. And so now the next step for us is to submit the nominating letter to try to get it on the actual intended funding list for 2021. Next slide, please. One of the things that we have done was we've changed the location of where we're planning on putting the well and tower. Some of you may remember that the D.R. Horton was intending to donate a site up there in the upper left-hand corner of the picture and that was to be a future site for the water treatment and water tower location. Because development hasn't happened as fast as everybody expected back when that annexation agreement was crafted, we're looking to move the site down to the new location there further to the south. And one of the main reasons or advantages to that is it eliminates that long run of water main and sewer main that would need to be extended up to that site. We'd need both water and sewer extended. Obviously, water's the obvious one, but sewer for the discharge from the treatment operation that's going to go in. So in order to postpone the construction of that water main extension and sewer extension that would typically be done by a developer as they progress in their development stages, we're going to put the site down further, close to existing utilities. So there's existing water main and sewer at that location. We can avoid those costs now. So the change in scope that we're talking about on the water side really isn't a change in scope in regards to anything that's being, removed or added to the project. But what we're talking about is just maybe taking interim step, building what we were planning on doing in 2 phases instead of 1. And so, as you may recall, the original plan was to advance well number 3, construct a treatment building, and construct a water tower and complete the connecting main to provide the backup of both the well and tower at that site that I showed in the prior slide. And that opinion of probable cost was somewhere around $9.5 million. What we're talking about doing is now just advancing well number 3 and constructing the treatment building, and doing what we call phase 1 of that original plan, and for a reduced cost about just shy of $6 million. And still following the same philosophy that the treatment building would be constructed to accommodate well number 4 in the future, but you wouldn't put the additional equipment in that treatment building until which time well 4 was advanced. So you'd be set up in the future, but we'd only be doing that part right now. And then somewhere in the near future, depending on the pace of development, add the elevated tank later. A little reduction in cost, and because we're assuming that assuming all the connecting water main and sewer extensions will exist from the development. So that's a way that we can save some money. Just trying to give you a time frame of when we would be looking at the tower and well being added for the new tower and well 4. We need to reach to about 1 million gallons per day of average daily demand before that next tower is constructed. I actually want to be in front of that so that Pat can handle that. Right now, we're assuming that's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2030, depending what the growth projections we have right now. But that is all subject to change based on annexations and where things go here in the coming months and or years as we bounce back from COVID. So these are just, for lack of a better phrase, guesstimates about when those timeframes may happen. And it's all subject to the pace of development. And then well number 4, we want to be at to somewhere where we're at about 2.3 million gallons per day of our peak demand, not average demand, but peak demand. And that's when we'd want to be looking at advancing well number 4 and adding the additional treatment in that treatment facility. So what does that mean to our design contract? The original contract is there on your left in regards to the different fees that were proposed for the different steps to get through bidding and bidding phase. It was about a $1.1 million contract for design and bidding. By backing out the tower at this point in time, you can see how that impacts all the various steps through there. It doesn't obviously change the loan step nor the design changes that potentially put in there that Dean suggested we put in there to allow some things to be able to move during the design process, nor does it change the bidding and negotiation phase, but it does change the preliminary engineering, the test well, and the final design. So it's a reduction of about $400,000 of our fees that we'd be asking for a change order from you guys to reduce our contract to match up the scope. One of the other things that we want to talk about, and I'm probably looking for a little feedback tonight or maybe in a future meeting if you guys want to think about it. I want to talk a little bit about the test well and why we do a test well, what the purpose of one is, and why yours maybe have an opportunity to be a little bit different than normal. The test well is something that we traditionally do, and the IEPA recommends so that you can find out for sure, what you have for capacity at that, what the aquifer will produce for groundwater. So you can adequately size your borehole to make sure that you'll get the gallons per minute that you're looking for, or that the aquifer will produce the gallons per minute that you're looking for. The other thing that you're usually looking for is what they call down your static height of your groundwater elevation and what they call your drawdown height. So when you turn your pump on, how far that water is drawn down as that pump removes 1,100 gallons a minute. So you can size your pump and your motors. The last thing that you typically do is you grab water samples to take a look at the analytics for your hardness, your contaminants like barium or iron or lead or radium or whatever, so you can see what kind of water quality you have and what kind of water treatment you may or may not need. The first two items are pretty rudimentary that you typically do, and the other ones are more that you do. A lot of places do that kind of analytics, for example, like radium removal or barium removal, because they're looking to see if in fact this is a good site for a well, or if this is, you know, if there's another place in town that we can look for a site to capture groundwater where we don't have to treat that. I have a community right now where, because of our test well activities, we physically moved the location of a well to another location in town to avoid treatment. So in your particular case, we're going into this with a preconceived notion that we're going to have to do treatment regardless. And so all we're really looking at on the analytics side is to be able to adequately design the treatment equipment, make sure that it can handle the loading. And so what we're wondering is the traditional way of looking at a test well makes sense in your case. So next slide, please, Dean. So the traditional test well approach is you advance a small borehole all the way to depth. You do your test pump and your analytics, and then you abandon that hole. You fill it back full of bentonite and you seal it up and you walk away from it. And then based on the information that you gathered from that test well, you advance another well bore, that's the actual well itself, to the right size and diameter and depth and casing specs that you determined from the test well analytics. In your situation, if you do the traditional pros, we're looking at a test well cost of about 410 grand, and then another $900,000 to advance the well bore for well number 3, for a total of about 1.3 million bucks. What we're contemplating, since we aren't going to be doing a test well and then maybe potentially looking at another site, is shown on the next slide, where instead, why not go in and do the first borehole, which is going through what is called the overburden. So that's the earthen material that's between the surface and when you hit bedrock. And in Pingree Grove, you have an unusually thick amount of overburden. So what we're contemplating is going ahead and putting in that oversized casing pipe that would be for your final well construction, all the way down to bedrock, and install that as part of the test bore, and then advance a small bore down through the bedrock to depth and do our test well activities for like the pump test and grab the analytics, and then cap that well borehole for the time being until we come back as part of the contract and we ream that smaller diameter hole to the correct diameter for the actual final well construction for well number 3. So we, just as this slide shows, we do the overburden casing, we do the small bore for the test well, and we do our test pump and grab our water sample and find out what kind of water quality we have. And then after that was all done as part of the actual well project itself that was designed, permitted, and approved by the IEPA, and then bid and awarded to a contractor, they'd come back and ream that small borehole in that same casing and put the final well in. And what we're looking at for costs there is the test well and overburden casing. It increased the cost during the test well phase, but it reduces the cost during the design, during the actual well construction phase, for a total of about $1 million. So the summary is on the next page, where the traditional approach is about 1.3, the alternate is about $1 million. It'll increase your initial test well cost by 140 grand. And decrease the total cost by about $310,000. I mean, these are all estimates, obviously, but that's the kind of magnitude of dollars we're talking about. Now, the reason why we're asking this is because, as I think we talked about before, the test well activity is not something that we'd seek reimbursement under the IEPA revolving loan. And so this would be part of coming out of your pocket, not necessarily coming out of the loan proceeds that we'd be getting in the future months. And so you'd be spending more of the money from your current source, from the enterprise fund, but you'd be saving overall dollars long term. So I just thought it would be worth our time to at least mention this, talk about it, and get some feedback from you guys. And apparently I need to turn my lights on in here.
So in the ordinary course, the reasons why we would do a smaller test well, most of those are inapplicable here because we already know what some of the circumstances surrounding the water quality and depth are. That's why in this case, spending more to do the smaller bore in some ways doesn't make sense. Is there a theoretical risk that we do this and encounter some circumstance that can't be accounted for and the larger bore would have to be abandoned and we'd have to come up with a different type of approach? I think there's always a theoretical risk of something like that, but we've mitigated that to the greatest extent possible by looking both at our internal data on our existing wells and also looking at wells from other communities across the region. We have a pretty good understanding of what the aquifers are in this area, but getting final confirmation on the exact water quality is something that we really need to do in order to finalize the design for the rest of that treatment plant. So our goal here is, instead of drilling a hole and abandoning it and drilling a new hole next to it, looking at if there's a way of approaching this project differently and reducing our total cost. And this is what we came up with. In terms of moving forward with this, we would like to proceed forward with the revision to the engineering contract, potentially even as soon as the next meeting. I think it is commendable that Fair Graham identified. They've worked with us, on a number of changes in the scope of the project and even moving where the project is to try and make this something that we can attain in the near term. They've worked with the EPA on revisions to our project plan at no additional cost to make those changes. And they came forward and volunteered what the reduction in the scope of their project would be. It's really a sign of the relationship that we have developed with them. Then as we started talking about the project more and trying to brainstorm additional ideas, this is a non-traditional approach, but it's one that has the potential to save us $310,000 on the overall cost of this project. And that's a really amazing opportunity that we have that we really wanted to explore with the board. If the board is supportive of this, as we move forward with the amendment to the Fair Graham contract, we would draft that contract in a way that contemplates this approach. The final vote on that would be when we bring back the actual contract for approval. And after that, we would look at moving forward with contracts on the test bore, which would be from a well drilling firm, essentially. But we'd like some feedback this evening on the concept to see if this is something the board wants to explore more.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, opportunity to, of course, save money, but yeah, it definitely makes sense.
I agree. Anything we can do to save money, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's definitely worth exploring.
I think it would save time if it is what it sounds like to me. Also, we didn't say anything about the interest we'd be saving in that $310,000.
I'm in agreement as well. It sounds like a good opportunity to save some money and to move forward.
We will ask Fair Graham to work up an updated engineering proposal then, and we'll work to get that to the board as soon as possible. We'll also start investigating what exactly it's going to take to get under contract for the test well.
I have a question. I noticed some young guys skateboarding out by that station down at the end of Reinking. And I was wondering if we might want to consider putting a fence around that once we get a well in there, or is that already something that we are going to do?
The lift station at the end of Reinking?
Yes.
That building itself is brick and is relatively secure, but I'll defer to Pat if he has any thoughts on that.
I believe as part of the water project, we would probably fence that in to make sure everything is secure at the plant. And we could include the lift station as well at that time.
That's what I thought would be the case, yes.
Great. Well, thanks. I appreciate the input. And I look forward to making this happen.
We're glad to have you leading the project here, Mick. I think it's made a huge difference from our previous experiences with engineering firms. So,
no, thank you. We work hard at that. We try to be more than just number crunchers.
Okay, Shelley, do you have anything tonight?
Yes, I just wanted to speak briefly about the current status of the Community Garden Committee. The ordinance that establishes the committee names or indicates that there is 7 members that would be appointed with staggering 3-year terms. And currently the membership is short of that. Those are, appointed people and basically they've been working with a smaller group. Typically their appointments would commence on July 1st. So we had reached out to Rich Eckert to discuss with him how he saw the committee functioning and whether or not he felt the need to continue with a formal committee that has the appointed members, or if they would prefer to be more of an informal committee or an informal group, not a committee. And that wouldn't require, they don't meet, they don't have public meetings, so there's no minutes being taken. They basically have a real good process where they work with staff. The coordinator, which would be Rich at this time, manages the garden plot assignments, and he works with Public Works for any garden area maintenance, but then Rich handles the actual plot assignments, and then the people that are renting a spot fill out their forms, submit them directly to the village. They pay their fees directly to the village. So they don't really have to be a part of that process. They just let us know, which plot somebody is assigned to. So we just wanted to get board feedback on whether or not they would like to allow the group to continue on in this more informal fashion. Currently, Rich, like I said, is the coordinator. There's other recent committee members of Arlene Eckert, and Trustee Pearson has also been involved. So they would prefer to move on in an informal basis. Staff recommendation at this time would be to allow that and not make any changes to the code or ordinance. So we just wanted to get the board's feedback if that's something that you are in agreement on.
I agree. If it's working for that board and it's working for the staff, just let it run as is.
Yeah, I don't see a real need for an official committee as it was originally started.
I also agree.
Yeah, likewise. Sounds good.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's all I had for this evening.
Okay, thanks, Shelley.
you.
Do we have any old or new business before we move to executive session? Okay, can we get a motion?
And we are requesting for items 1 and 4 only. So that would be for a motion to adjourn an executive session for the purpose of discussing hiring, termination, discipline, compensation, or performance of a specific employee or volunteer pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C1, and to discuss pending or imminent litigation pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C11.
So moved.
Second.
Shelley, call the roll, please.
Trustee Hirschbein,
Yes.
Trustee Pearson,
Yes.
Trustee Kubiak,
Yes.
Trustee Dalkowski is still absent. She had to leave the meeting. Trustee Lemus,
Yes.
motion carried.
For the benefit of the public, there will be an executive session at this point in time. We're going to discontinue the live stream of the meeting. At the conclusion of the executive session, the board will briefly reconvene in open session, and the sole purpose of that reconvening will be to adjourn the meeting. There will be no other discussion of public business at that point in time. So at this point, we're going to conclude the live stream.